I'm Chaim Poupko from Congregation Avas Torah in Englewood. I'm honored to serve on the RCA Executive Committee and to share with you this Dvar Torah on Parshat Shemot. There's this phrase that we know, hearts and minds. It's found in our contemporary vernacular, and it comes from a comment made by President Lyndon Johnson at the outset of the Vietnam War. He said at the time that the ultimate victory will depend on the hearts and minds of the people who actually live out there. A similar sentiment was expressed in the preparations for the more recent Gulf War and Iraq War. But in all of those battles, it doesn't seem that the Americans were successful in winning over the hearts and minds. The reason they were unsuccessful in winning over hearts and minds is based on an idea that I believe is reflected in something Moshe says to Hashem in Parshat Shemot. When Moshe initially declines Hashem's request at the burning bush to send him to take the Jewish people out of Mitzrayim, it's important to note that Moshe isn't just pushing Hashem off. I don't believe it was only humility and a lack of willingness that was driving Moshe's protests. I believe that each argument of Moshe represents a particular belief or deeply held conviction. Consider his first response to Hashem's request. Mi anochi ki elech el paro v'chi otzi es b'nei Yisrael mimitzrayim. While at first glance Moshe appears to be expressing deep humility, if we look at the entire pasuk, we find that his hesitancy has as much to do with the Jewish people as it does with himself. His focus isn't just on his own inadequacy. He has reservations about Bnei Yisrael as well. Moshe is expressing doubt as to whether the people are ready to be redeemed and whether he can instill in them a sense of redemption. This is what truly bothered Moshe, I believe. Because what Moshe understands very well is what it takes to inspire a revolution, to change people's attitudes towards themselves and their situation. Indeed, he left the palace of Paro and tried to set an example for freedom and justice, only to be scoffed at by his brethren. And so his initial reluctance is based on real experience. He has good reason to doubt the fortitude of the people. The people he left behind in Egypt had no sense of hope or aspirations for freedom and a better life. But let's ask the following question. Why didn't Moshe believe that Hashem has the ability to redeem them no matter what their sense of hope or freedom was? Let's just take them out and teach them about freedom. The reason I believe is because Moshe understands that it's not enough to just take the people out. The redemption from slavery represents a cultural change. And in order to break one culture and gain a new national outlook, you need to have the hearts and minds. You need to have hearts and minds that are ready for such cultural change. Moshe was able to see that the Jewish people lacked this sense. And this is something that Kadosh Baruch Hu does not do. He does not change the hearts and the minds. People have free will and they must come to these feelings on their own. Sure, the Kadosh Baruch Hu could take them out of the bondage of Mitzrayim, but to truly experience a very real geula, they must undergo their own cultural change. They must gain a new world outlook on their own. This helps to explain Hashem's enigmatic response to Moshe's first rejection. V'zelecha ha'os ki ani shalachticha v'hotziacha es ha'am mitzrayim tavdun es ha'elokim al ha'har hazeh. How does this address Moshe's concerns? This will be the sign that you'll serve Hashem on this mountain. If Moshe is so worried about the people's capacity to feel a sense of freedom, then it's clear that what Hashem is telling Moshe is that by the end of this process, they will have that sense of freedom to the degree that they will be able to serve Hashem on that mountain. They will have the hearts and minds of a people with a sense of liberty and freedom to choose willingly to serve a God that they had not heard from in several hundred years, and not their familiar taskmasters. In effect, what Moshe teaches us is that a revolution or change in culture can only result from a change in the hearts and minds. Revolutions will never be successful if they're trying to bring about a change in people's hearts and minds. This is the mistaken belief in the Vietnam War and the Iraqi War. But if we look at the very first person to use the phrase hearts and minds, long before Lyndon Johnson, we find that he knew this very well. John Adams, one of the founding fathers of this country, wrote in a letter in 1818 that the American Revolution, quote, was effected before the war commenced. The revolution was in the minds and hearts of the people, he wrote, and the radical change in the principles, opinions, sentiments, and affections of the people was the real American Revolution. In other words, what brought about the American Revolution was not the War of Independence and the associated political developments. Rather, the American Revolution was a product of the change in the hearts and minds of the people that was already going on. Now, I don't talk from my pulpit about politics and certain kinds of current events like many of you, but as I convey this Dvar Torah, I can't help but think of the young people in Iran and their reactions to the events unfolding there right now, and how it's very clear where the hearts and minds are of many sectors in Iranian society. And I'm not including it in this Dvar Torah, but it's something to think about in terms of this long-standing conflict between the U.S. And Iran, and how the recent events have uncovered something that I'm sure many people have known and seen already is in the hearts and minds of people in Iran. Have a good Shabbos.